I'm sure many of you are familiar with what a sleeper PC is, but basically it's taking an old, often beige color PC case from the 90s or early 2000s and building a modern computer in it. They're great if you appreciate the retro look, or if you just want to guarantee that your PC won't get stolen in a break-in. Today I've got something special for you. I want to show off this beauty that I recently built. This is my newest sleeper PC. Not only does this look like a straight out of your grandma's garage, but this thing is a very capable PC as well. Starting with my favorite part of this build, the case. I still haven't been able to find much information about this exact model, but I think it was a generic case that a few system integrators used in the 2000s to put their computers in. This one came from a now out of business computer store called Totally Awesome Computers, as you can see by this emblem. I found it at a local thrift store for $5 a few years ago, and it was a perfect foundation for a sleeper PC because it supports standard ATX motherboards out of the box, meaning no need to jimmy rig anything just to get a motherboard installed. I've used this case over a few different builds, and over time I've continued to modify it here and there. For the initial mods, I cut a hole in the front for an intake fan, and then I painted the inside black and installed some front panel USB and audio connectors. Later, I added a 5 1/4 inch drive bay cover. This had some fans on it, and so initially I thought this would help with airflow, but those little fans were just too small, so I removed them, and now it just kind of is a cover to make the case look a little more clean. One of the negatives that I have found with this case, and a lot of other older PC cases, is the limited airflow. This one started with a single 90mm exhaust fan, and that's it. The front panel intake fan that I added helps, but I wanted more airflow without sacrificing the look of the case. Options like cutting the side panel or the top for more ventilation would ruin the look of the case if not done right. And based on my experience and limited tools, this case is not easy to cut clean holes in. So after taking some inspiration from some different styles of cases and doing some rough measurements, I decided to cut additional holes in the bottom of the case for more intake fans. So I bought a 120mm hole saw bit, and it was supposed to be able to cut through metal, but after spending about 45 minutes trying to drill the first hole, I ended up just drilling out a circle of individual small holes around the circumference to actually get through the steel sheet metal. The holes look pretty bad, honestly, but luckily this is on the bottom of the case, and both of them are going to be covered by fans. So on the inside, it won't be noticeable. And then also on the outside, I have a magnetic dust filter that I've put on the bottom. This will work well for keeping the dust out, but also covering up those hack job holes. From the outside, and looking at it at most angles, you can't tell at all that there's even holes at the bottom of the case, so I think it turned out pretty well. In addition to the holes, I added some feet to the case because the original rubber ones didn't give the case much clearance to pull air in from the bottom. I sold these feet off an incomplete white case that I had sitting around. The clean white color of these feet stood out to me compared to the beige case, so I sanded them a bit and then used some brown shoe polish to get the colors closer together. This turned out better than I expected. If you get close, they do look a little dirty, but at a distance, they just look beige. So the case does stand a bit higher now, and it does look a little strange to me, and I think that was just because I got used to it having a lower clearance. I'm pretty sure if you're not thinking about it or you don't know that there was a change there, it doesn't look off. It looks pretty normal. So I've been talking about the case this whole time. That's one of the parts that really excites me. I think it's awesome, and I think it's turned out pretty well, but I'm sure you're all dying to know what components are actually going in this build. It's taken a little bit of time over the last few months to pick up all the parts because I'm a cheapskate, and rather than buying something new, I need to obsessively watch Facebook Marketplace to save a few bucks. So I've finally been able to pick up most of the parts. For this system, I'll be putting together my first AM5 build. I wasn't sold on going with AM5 until I found this MSI X670E Gaming Plus Wi-Fi motherboard for $100. This thing has support for PCIe Gen 5, and more USB ports than I know what to do with, honestly. But after finding that for a good deal, naturally I started looking for a processor. I really wanted an X3D processor just because there's a few games I play, specifically Hunt Showdown, that can utilize that 3D cache really well, and it gives you some higher frame rates. But when this 9600X, this Ryzen 5 9600X popped up for $130, I had to jump at the opportunity. After some back and forth with the seller, I talked them down to $125, and that's just good enough price to performance that I'm going with it. After that, I found this 32GB kit of Corsair Vengeance DDR5 listed for $70. I was able to offer the seller $60 and pick it up for that price. The timings weren't exactly what I was looking for, but I should be able to tinker with them and adjust them as needed. A little editor's note here. I'm pretty happy that I was able to pick this up when I did, just because RAM prices have gone crazy, and I was able to get a little bit ahead of that curve, I guess. Picking up a kit on the used market saved me a little bit of money, but also just the timing of it. Like looking at RAM prices now, things are easily doubled for the same type of kit, if not way more. Outside of those parts, I had mostly everything else I needed on hand. I've been using this 750 watt EVGA power supply for testing components over the last year or so. This came in a bundle that I picked up. After splitting up that bundle, it cost me maybe 25 bucks. So it should work perfectly for this situation because it is modular as well. So that way I can avoid some of the extra spaghetti that I would have with a non-modular power supply. For the boot drive, I'm using this 1TB WD SN530 drive that I pulled from a pre-built HP that I had on hand. And then for the CPU cooler, I do have a few AMD stock coolers, and I think that maybe I could have gotten away with one of those. But honestly, I wanted something a little better. I wasn't really going for a low budget system in this build, so I decided to go with this Thermalright Peerless Assassin 120 SE that I had sitting around. Lastly, for the GPU, I'll be using this RTX 3080 Ti. I picked this up last year for a crazy deal, and it's still working great. It's an MSI Ventus model, so the cooler's not amazing, but I can't complain much with it only costing me a couple $100. It also came with a water block for a custom water cooling loop, so I want to put that to good use at some point, and I've got plans to. So here's a parts and price breakdown of the finished build. Not too shabby for just around 600 bucks. Also, it looks just as shabby as I want for a sleeper PC. I really like how this turned out, and I've got high hopes for the extra airflow. So I'm going to test some games and see how it performs, and also take a look at the temperatures we're seeing. To no surprise, Overwatch runs at frame rates that are well into the realm of diminishing returns. For any benefit for someone like me at my skill level, at 1440p low, averages sat above 500 with 1% lows in the 260s. Next up, I tested Doom Eternal, and I think I would have a hard time choosing what settings and resolution to play this game at. On one hand, 4K high settings, the FPS stayed above 100 for the most part, while at 1440p and 1080p, both came in above 200 FPS. The high FPS is nice in this game, but 4K still felt smooth enough that if I just wanted to enjoy the visuals, it would be a good experience all around. Cyberpunk's another game I'm not sure what settings I'd stick with. At 1440p ultra settings with ray tracing and DLSS on, the system comfortably sits above 60 FPS, but with ray tracing turned off, moving down to high settings, the frame rate practically doubled. So I think I'd probably go with the higher FPS in this case, as a personal preference. Next up for Hunt Showdown, I tested in the shooting range, and at the 1440p high preset, with DLSS turned off, I saw averages that sat in the 140s, and then 1% lows in the 110s. Changing over to more competitive settings at 1080p low, I saw an average of about 250 with 1% lows in the 170s. Lastly, in the Black Myth Wukong benchmark, at 1440p very high settings, the FPS sat just below 60. Then I tested medium settings, and that jumped up to the 100s. Honestly, this combo could handle pretty much any game currently. Obviously, in some, depending on the resolution, you might need to adjust your settings a bit. But again, for 600 bucks, and also looking like this, you can't go wrong. So temperatures were in check, although a bit higher than I was hoping for, if I'm being honest. They never went higher than the low 80s for both the GPU and CPU. And then interestingly, the CPU stayed a couple of degrees cooler in a CPU benchmark, Cinebench, when maxing out the CPU compared to when gaming. And I think that's likely the case and the GPU affecting this. Because of the airflow, both the intake on the bottom and the side are getting sucked in by the GPU first. And then whatever is left over or is exhausted from the GPU is what the CPU is using. So it's not really anything to be concerned with, as both the CPU and GPU temperatures are in check. So anyways, this system was a lot of fun to build. I always have a good time when I'm building a sleeper PC. Not only does this thing look sweet, but it performs like a champ, and it didn't break the bank. If you're thinking about building a sleeper PC, I highly recommend it. I think you'll have a lot of fun with it if you're into building PCs, and you also like the retro look a bit. It's really fun to have a modern system in an older looking case. It doesn't have to be anything fancy either. Like, it could just be a pretty basic gaming PC. Anyways, as always, thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I've got some updates coming for the PC Flip Up Challenge soon. So keep your eye out for those, and I'll see you later.